Well, good morning, brethren, and also to those who join us on Zoom. It's great to be with you all here today. I've visited here many times, but this is the first time I've actually had the opportunity to speak. I wasn't planning on speaking, and then on Thursday, Wayne sort of roped me into it to do the sermon, so I'm happy for the opportunity. Now, many of you know that I went to Israel and Jordan 2 years ago with the Robertsons and the Nelsons. Now, Jeff Robertson gave a sermon in Brisbane giving his overview of the trip, which he may have given up here. I'm not sure if he had. Now, today I'd like to do the same and do a bit of an overview of the North and Central Israel. Now, if I do a good enough job here, and you want me back by popular demand, I'll do a part 2 on Southern Israel and Jordan. Now, Israel is an amazing country that I've had the privilege of visiting 3 times so far. Now, my first trip there was for 3 days back in 1999 at the end of a 5-week trip to Europe with my good friend Trevor Christie and another friend who are just visible in that top left photo there. Now, my second trip was for a week on my own in 2008, and my last trip was in June 2023, 2 years ago. Now, on our trip we had for the middle part of it, we had 7 Aussies and 7 Americans for a trip that was organised by Jeff Robertson's Ambassador College friend, Joe Ross, who's this fella here. And we had 3 weeks that he organised. We had 3 weeks in Israel, including 5 days participating on a dig, which was far too long, at Tel Burna, believed to be the biblical city of Libnah. Now, after our tour of Israel, our Aussie group then did a week afterwards going through Jordan. Now, the trip was exhausting and expensive, but very well worth it. There's nothing quite like visiting the places where the events of the Bible actually took place to help bring those stories to life. So that's what I'm endeavoured to do here today for you. Now, from a geographical point of view, it's important to understand why God chose this particular land to give to Israel. Now, the land of Israel is situated near the intersection of the 3 great continents of Africa, Asia, and Europe. Now, Ezekiel 5, verse 5, God said that I have set her in the centre of the nations with countries all around her. Now, Israel as a nation was meant to draw and attract the Gentiles to God as they saw and observed what God was doing through Israel. Now, this syncs in well with what Jesus said to his followers in the Sermon on the Mount when he says that we are to be a light to the world and a city that is set on a hill. We are to be a visible display of what it is like to live God's way. Now, Israel is a relatively small country. Now, the expression from Dan to Beersheba is used quite a number of times in the Bible to refer to the whole length of the land. Now, the distance between Dan and Beersheba is about 280 kilometres, which is about the same distance driving from Noosa down to Coolangatta. Now, Israel is a lot narrower going east to west. So from Tel Aviv on the coast to the Jordan River, it's only about 75 kilometres long, or the distance between here and Brisbane. Now, the driving distance from Dan to Eilat on the Gulf of Aqaba, much further south, is 470 kilometres, which is a similar distance to go from, say, Noosa down to Grafton. Now, just before Israel entered the Promised Land, God told them that it was a good land, a land of wheat and honey, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates and many other great things. Now, the land that God brought Israel into was not a desert. And that is especially true for the much greener north of Israel that we'll focus on today. Now, Israel is a land of great variety of landscapes, from beautiful Mediterranean coastline to forested mountains to desert areas. Now, the cities of Jerusalem, Haifa and Tel Aviv all receive approximately 500 millimetres or about 20 inches of rain per year. Now, that's about half of what we get in Brisbane. And as you go further south and east of Jerusalem, that drops off quite significantly in those desert areas. So Israel has a number of distinct regions. Now, running along the Mediterranean coast is the coastal plain. Now, as we move inland and running north to south through the centre of the country are the Central Highlands. Now, most of this area is between about 700 to 1,000 metres above sea level. Now, where we are today in Toowoomba on the Great Dividing Range is about 700 metres above sea level, so it's fairly similar. Now, going further east is the Great Rift Valley, through which the Jordan River passes through. Now, the deepest part of the Rift Valley is where the Dead Sea is, which is about 400 metres below sea level. Now, what came to a surprise to me, I didn't even know the first two times that I went to Israel, is that the Sea of Galilee itself is 200 metres below sea level. Now, in between the Central Highlands and the Galilee further north is the Jezreel Valley, which is shaped like an arrow. And to the north of the Jezreel Valley is the area that is known as the Galilee, which is an elevated and in some places quite mountainous area. Now, notice the shaded area in the middle of the map here on the left here. Now, that's the area that's today called the West Bank. Now, Jordan captured it in 1948 during the War of Independence, and then Israel recaptured it from Jordan during the Six-Day War of 1967. Now, while Israel has overall control, certain parts within the West Bank, designated Area A, are actually off limits to Israelis. So places such as Shechem, Samaria, Bethlehem and Hebron, which are all dripping in Bible history, are all Area A. Now, tourists like us can visit these areas, but not with a car that's registered in Israel. Now, your options to visit these places include the few organised tours that go there, or you can hire a Palestinian tour guide to take you to them, which is a fairly expensive option, which I opted out this past time, but hope to do next time. Now, tourism is actually welcomed by the Palestinians who desire it to boost their economy. Now, in addition to the Area A places, there's the Area C places which Israelis can go to, such as Jericho, Qumran, the Herodian and Shiloh. So there are 5 distinct regions in northern Israel that we'll look at briefly today. There's the plain of Asher along the coast, the Galilee further inland, the Hula Valley north of the Sea of Galilee, the Golan Heights on the eastern side of the Hula Valley and the Sea of Galilee, and the Jezreel Valley in between the hilly regions of Samaria and Galilee. Now, the first region we'll quickly explore is the plain of Asher. Now, on our trip, we visited 4 places in the plain of Asher, which are noted here on the trip. Now, the port city of Haifa is Israel's 3rd largest city. Now, that aerial panoramic up the top there is one that I took from using my drone, which was a lot of fun using in Israel, I have to say. Now, I was able to use it in most places except for Jerusalem and the West Bank where it's restricted. Now, we also stayed at the beautiful Arab port city of Akko. Now, in the New Testament, it was known as Ptolemais and is mentioned as one of Paul's stops during one of his missionary journeys. Now, right near the border with Lebanon are the beautiful sea caves of Rosh Hanikra. Now, sadly, much of this area and also the area between Hatzor and Tel Dan, north of the Sea of Galilee, had to be evacuated after the October 7 Hamas attack due to the constant missile threats by Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, hopefully by now, Hezbollah have been neutralised enough to allow a lot of those people to be able to move back there now. Now, a little inland, we also visited the Keshet Cave, which really is a natural bridge. Now, I was very glad that we went there just for this incredible view of the entire northern part of Israel. Now, further inland is the Galilee region, where we visited Nazareth and Sepphoris, as well as many places along the Sea of Galilee. Now, Sepphoris is a city about 6 kilometres northwest of Nazareth, where 1st and 2nd century ruins were discovered just only a few decades ago. Now, it sits on a hill overlooking the beautiful Beit Natofa Valley. Now, the top panoramic photo shows the view looking north from Sepphoris. Now, Nazareth at the time of Jesus was quite a small town and there wouldn't have been much building going on. So it's quite possible that Jesus' father, Joseph, and perhaps Jesus himself did some building work here at Sepphoris. Now, Sepphoris has some wonderful mosaics, including one that has been called the Mona Lisa of the Galilee. Now, next to the Mona Lisa mosaic, you can see a blank U-shaped area on the floor there, which is where the couches called a triclinium were placed for Roman feasts. Now, those feasting would recline with the food served on the inside, which we today probably call finger food, and often eaten with pieces of bread. Now, this would have been how the dinner would have been set up for Jesus' last Passover. Now, if you recall in Luke 7:38, we read of a sinful woman who anointed Jesus' feet when he was dining with others. And it says that she stood at his feet behind him, weeping, meaning she wasn't under the table, but she was on the outside of this triclinium. Now, here are a few shots from when we were at Nazareth Village, which was built up to show what it would have been like here during Jesus' time. Now, the bottom left photo there shows an authentic olive press with large stones that's suspended off a large log that crushed the olives. Now, what they would do would be 3 drops of that huge olive press log. Now, the first drop would produce the purest virgin olive oil. The second drop produced a lesser quality olive oil. And then the third drop produced a more viscous oil. Now, the tour guide there compared Jesus praying 3 times at Gethsemane with this. Now, the word Gethsemane itself means olive press. Now, she noted that the 3rd time that Jesus prayed, blood came out of him, just like that last, more viscous oil produced on the 3rd drop of the olive press. Now, when we got to the Sea of Galilee, we got the chance to enjoy a beautiful, lovely boat cruise there. Now, in the background, you can see Mount Arbel behind us there, and that is the traditional site where Jesus gave the Great Commission to the disciples. Now, along the northern shoreline of the Sea of Galilee is the town of Capernaum. Now, Mark 2 verse 1 we read, "And again he entered into Capernaum after some days, and it was heard that he was in the house." In the parallel account in Matthew 9, it says that he came to his own city, indicating Capernaum was where Jesus was living during his ministry. Now, you note there's an 8-sided church there that sits above an earlier site that is believed to be Peter's house. Now, Mark 1:21, it says that Jesus entered the synagogue at Capernaum. Now, the upper section of the white marble synagogue that you see there today in Capernaum is from 300 years after the time of Jesus, but the basalt foundation underneath would have been from the time of the 1st century and the time of Jesus. Now, the traditional site for where Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount is the Mount of Beatitudes, a short distance west of Capernaum. Now, a lovely memorial church has been built there, and the location gives this wonderful panorama of the beautiful Sea of Galilee. Now, when I drove on my second trip there, when I was driving around the North Shore for the first time, I was wondering, why does this place seem so much like home? And I realised it was because of all the eucalypt trees around this particular area. The eucalypt trees were actually imported into the Hula Valley to help with draining a lot of the swamp areas there. Now, about 4 kilometres north of the Sea of Galilee is another major town where Jesus preached to, the city of Chorazin. Now, there are basalt ruins of an early Jewish synagogue there, as well as a replica of a Moses seat that was found there. Now, the Moses seat was where the person doing the weekly reading of the Torah would sit. Now, in the bottom left photo there, you can see me sitting on that Moses seat reading from the Torah. Now, this is where we were slumming it in the city of Tiberias on the western shore of the sea. Not a bad view, eh? And we got to enjoy some quality pool and spa time while we were there as well. Now, the Hula Valley lies to the north of the Sea of Galilee and is the valley through which the upper Jordan River flows from around Tel Dan down to the Sea of Galilee. Now, the Jordan River is close to sea level near Tel Dan at the very north, and then it gradually descends to over 200 metres below sea level when it reaches the Sea of Galilee. Now, Hatzor, a little further north, was the largest city during the Canaanite period, and Hatzor led the Northern Confederation that was defeated by Joshua and the Israelites. Now, Solomon later fortified Hatzor, and there's a quite impressive 6-chambered city gate there, amongst other features in the city. Now, here is a great aerial view of Tel Dan in the very north of Israel. Now, in the background there, you can see Israel's highest mountain, Mount Hermon, which unfortunately didn't have snow when we were there. Now, also noted is where the famous Tel Dan stela was found that mentioned about a king from the house of David. Now, Tel Dan is a beautiful place to visit with several rushing streams like the one in the above photo that come together to form the Jordan River. Now, the flowing water there makes it a very serene and magical place to visit. Now, when Israel split into 2 kingdoms following the death of Solomon, Dan and Bethel became the location of the 2 golden calves that Jeroboam I set up. Now, in the photos here, the still frame shows where the altar was, which was where the burnt offerings took place, and up and up behind on the platform would have been where the golden calf was. Now, not too far away from Tel Dan is Caesarea Philippi, where there was a pagan temple to the Greek god Pan. Now, that temple was near the great cave from which an underground spring fed the waters that feed the Jordan River. Now, from a Greco-Roman perspective, this cave literally was a gate to hell or the underworld, as the Greek word used for hell here, Hades, can mean both the grave and also the underworld where the dead go to. Now, this location would have made a dramatic impression as Jesus talked about the kingdom of God versus the kingdom of Satan, where Jesus pronounced that the kingdom of God would ultimately be victorious. Now, canoeing is very popular in the northern upper Jordan River, north of the Sea of Galilee. Now, we enjoyed a leisurely paddle down the river on our tour, and it was one of the most fun and memorable experiences that we did on the whole trip. Now, here's a short video that I found on the internet, plus a little bit of video that I also took.
You have to sit, you have to let it go, yes.
Roxy.
Oh, that's good.
You've got to love the way they launch those rafts, eh? Here's a couple of other photos that I took as we were heading down the Jordan. And the best part for me was that I didn't have to do any work paddling. I was sitting in the middle and chilling out and enjoying the scenery. So, I mean, you just imagine the scene. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, merrily, merrily down to the Sea of Galilee. Well, we didn't quite go that far.
The Golan Heights is a high plateau to the east of the Hula Valley along the border with Syria, which continues south to the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee, ending north of the valley formed by the Yarmuk River. Now, Israel's highest mountain, Mount Hermon, lies at the very top of this region. The Golan Heights was previously controlled by the Syrians, who often shot down on Israel from this high strategic ground. It was captured by Israel during the 1967 Six-Day War and has been part of Israel ever since. During the 1973 Yom Kippur War, Israel managed to hold onto it during a massive tank war where they were outnumbered 5-1. Now, the Golan Heights is a lush, beautiful and mysterious part of Israel. I only explored it in a limited way on my last trip and was quite impressed by what I saw, and I'm keen to explore a number of its scenic locations next time I go to Israel.
Now, the Jordan River separates the hilly Galilee region from the region of Samaria to the south, and it is shaped like an arrow. Now, the Jezreel Valley is a very fertile plain, and this is reflected in its name Jezreel, which means God sows. Now, I'm just going to point out a few places there. The Ford Megiddo guarded the Megiddo Pass through the Carmel Mountains to the coastal plain. Now, Megiddo is between Mount Carmel further north and Jezreel near the centre of the valley. Now, to the north of Jezreel were two important mountains, the Hill of Moreh and Mount Tabor. And south of Jezreel was Mount Gilboa. Now, at the base of Mount Gilboa was the famous spring called the Harod Spring, from which flowed the Harod Stream, that then flows on down to Beth Shan, which is situated at the crossroads of the Jezreel and Jordan River valleys. Now, here is the view above Mount Carmel, looking southeast along the range towards Megiddo. Now, on the right there is the Carmelite order church called Deir el-Maraka, which commemorates the victory of the prophet Elijah over the Baal prophets. Now, there would have been many hundreds, if not thousands, of people at this particular gathering where Elijah challenged the Baal prophets. There does seem to be a fairly large clearing just down here, which I sort of imagine that probably being the likely location where this event took place. Now, the fort of Megiddo has a very long history guarding the nearby pass, but it is best known for the gathering of the armies in the end time at Armageddon, meaning Hill of Megiddo. Now, on the northern side of the Jezreel Valley is Mount Precipice, close to Nazareth. Now, here's a photo showing the view looking east towards Mount Tabor and the Hill of Moreh. Now, it would have been on the slopes of the Hill of Moreh from where most of Gideon's army of 300 men blew their trumpets in the middle of the night while simultaneously breaking their pitchers and lighting up their torches to startle the Midianites and throw them into a panic. Now, in this photo, I've also noted where the Midianites were at Shunem and where the Israelites were on the opposite side of that valley by Mount Gilboa. Now, across the valley from the Hill of Moreh, on its southern side is the town of Jezreel, where Ahab and Jezebel had a palace. Now, notice how close it is to the Harod Spring and Mount Gilboa. Now, Saul tried to draw the Philistines away up onto the slopes of Mount Gilboa to nullify the Philistines' tactical advantage of using chariots in the plain. Now, Israel, however, would lose that battle, and Saul and Jonathan would die on the slopes of Mount Gilboa. Now, Tel Jezreel sits at an elevation close to sea level. Now, by the time you go down to Beth Shan, further down the valley there, it actually drops imperceptibly by about 130 metres below sea level. Now, on the northern side of Mount Gilboa is the Harod Spring, which flows out from a cave at its base. Now, it was here at the Harod Spring where Gideon's army was pared down to 100, from 10,000 down to only 300 men, so God would get the glory over the victory they would have over the Midianites. Now, along the Harod Stream between the Harod Spring and Beth Shan is Israel's best hidden gem, in my opinion, the beautiful swimming spot of Gan HaShlosha. Now, even its name sounds like the sloshing of waters. Now, the site was formed by widening the stream and doing some wonderful landscaping. The temperature is an ideal 28 degrees all year round, and it's fed by springs. I could actually swimming though, I could actually see something nipping at my feet as I walked along the bottom and realised it was actually the springs bubbling up from below. It truly is a magical place for a swim and my new favourite swimming spot in the entire world. No crocodiles there. I just love the colour of that water. That's Mount Gilboa Range in the background there. Now at the strategic junction of the Jezreel and Jordan valleys is the site of Beth Shan. Now this is where the Philistines hung up the bodies of Saul and Jonathan. Now that huge tell there is about 60 metres high. Now, Jeff really embarrassed me during his sermon on the trip by playing a video of me struggling to climb up that tell, but he sped it up several times, so it looked like something out of Benny Hill at the end of the Benny Hill episode. All I was actually missing was the Benny Hill chase music to go along with it. Now, in central Israel, there are two regions, the plain of Sharon along the coast and the high mountain plateau region of Samaria. Now, the Sharon Plain is the central section of Israel's coastal plain. Now, the plain lies between the Mediterranean Sea to the west and the Samarian Hills about 15 kilometres to its east. Now, Joppa or Jaffa is the ancient port just south of the modern city of Tel Aviv, which has a lovely old world charm about it. Now, it is known for several biblical events. It was where Jonah fled from God's call to preach to Nineveh, the healing of Tabitha, and where Peter stayed with Simon the Tanner when he had his vision about the conversion of the Gentiles. Now, just north of Joppa is Tel Aviv. Now, Tel Aviv is the economic and technological centre of the nation with a population of about 500,000. Now, Tel Aviv today is the hedonistic counterpart to the more spiritual Jerusalem. And the name Tel Aviv itself means tell of the spring. Now, like most Western nations, Israel follows much of the woke, politically correct ideology that is infecting the West. Now, one example I saw here was along the main esplanade, it was quite a number of gay pride banners. Now, on a more positive side, you do get to see some quite spectacular sunsets over the Mediterranean Sea there. Now, northwest of Tel Aviv, near the source of the Yarkon River, is the site of Afek. Now, between Afek and Ebenezer, near Highway 6, is where the Philistines defeated the Israelites and captured the Ark of the Covenant in the book of Judges. Now, further north, Caesarea was built as a port city by Herod the Great. Now, Herod erected a theatre, a hippodrome for chariot races, and built an aqueduct that brought in water amongst other features. Now, he also created an artificial port using huge blocks with concrete that actually set underwater. Now, this whole port area has been wonderfully restored and made into a restaurant precinct. And we got to enjoy quite a lovely dinner there. My meal was that great big pizza in the middle. Now, here is a view of the palace that Herod the Great built at Caesarea. Now, you can see the outline of the near Olympic-sized swimming pool that was part of the palace. Now, I've noted here the entrance to the underground prison at the palace where Paul was kept for 2 years around 60 AD. Now, just north of Caesarea are the remains of the impressive aqueduct that brought water into Caesarea. A place that I especially loved further north was the area of Dor, which is one of the most beautiful beaches in all of Israel. Now, Dor was also one of several places along the Israel and Lebanese coast that harvested the mollusks that produced the blue and purple dyes that were very valuable in the ancient world. Now, the last region we'll look at today is the region of Samaria, which is a wide highland plateau in central Israel. Now, it's close to about 50 kilometres wide, and the northwest part of that plateau narrows and bends west to form the Mount Carmel range that goes right up to the coast near Haifa. Now, bisecting the Samarian highlands, and shown here in yellow, is a valley that zigzags all the way from west to east. Now, in the middle of that valley was the very important city of Shechem. And further west of Shechem was the later northern kingdom capital city of Samaria. And to its north was the biblical site of Dothan. Now, going south from Shechem along the way of the patriarchs, shown in red here, was the site of Shiloh, where the tabernacle was during the time of the judges. And further south were the twin towns of Bethel and Ai, known in the book of Joshua. Now, the only place I was actually able to go to in Samaria this past trip was to Shiloh, which is quite a fantastic site. Now, after the conquest, the Israelites went to Shiloh, where they set up the tabernacle of meeting on this flat area to the north of the city walls. Now, you really have to imagine this place full of pilgrims from all over the land who have come for one of the 3 pilgrimage feasts, like the Feast of Tabernacles, with thousands camping on those surrounding hills, which acts as a natural amphitheatre for the priests teaching the law to the people. In fact, lots of pottery has been found on the front side of these surrounding hills and much less on the opposite side. Now, in closing, here's a quick look at some of those other Sumerian places that I hope to see next time with a Palestinian tour guide. Now, Shechem was Abraham's first stop in the Holy Land, where God first promised the land to his descendants. Now, it was also here where the Israelites stood on the mountains on either side and said amen to the blessings and the curses. Now, the covenant stone that Jacob erected is probably the one that was discovered and re-erected here in the inset photo. Now, Samaria was the main capital of the northern kingdom, further west of Shechem, and it was bought and developed by Ahab's father, Omri. Now, going further north is the site of Dothan, and it is the focus of 2 stories in the Bible. One is that this was the place where Joseph was sold into slavery, and the other was that it was here where Elisha had his vision of chariots of fire. Now, if you recall, after that vision, Elijah led the blinded Syrian army to Samaria, which is about 25 kilometres away, before their eyes were opened. And it's interesting that the Hebrew word there for blinded means fantasies, implying that they saw some form of virtual reality before God took away that illusion. Now, recently, the true city of Ai was discovered close to Highway 60 on the way up to Shiloh. Now, this discovery now allows us to geographically visualise the ambush and battle that took place when Joshua conquered that city. Now, on that note, I will conclude part 1 of this brief overview of the Holy Land. Now, if you'd like to see more, I've actually created an hour-long video with the best drone footage that I took on the trip, which you can easily find on YouTube by just typing in this particular title and searching for it. And I hope you've enjoyed this brief fly over Israel, and I hope it's helped to be able to help you better visualise some of the many events that took place in the Bible.